The MiG-29 is a Soviet-designed air superiority fighter manufactured by Russia. The J-11B and J-16 are Chinese versions of the Sukhoi Su-27 flanker and Su-30, respectively. India uses the MiG-29 UPG, an upgraded version of the original MiG-29. China manufactures its own J-11B and J-16 flanker variants locally. India uses the MiG-29 UPG primarily for air defense and limited strike duties. The J-11B and J-16 are China's frontline air superiority fighters, with multi-role capabilities similar to the Su-27 and Su-30. India currently operates over 60 MiG-29s, with plans to modernize more. The first on the list is an improved engine. China has around 300 J-11Bs and approximately 250 J-16s in service, with manufacture underway. In high-altitude mountainous terrain, the Chinese J-11B and J-16 likely outperform the MiG-29 in terms of thrust-to-weight ratio and operational ceilings. The Chinese jets are based on the Sukhoi flanker airframe, which is noted for its excellent high-altitude performance. The MiG-29 UPG's Shuk-Mi radar excels at air identification and tracking even in mountainous terrain. The J-11B and J-16 are also equipped with modern radars with equivalent detection capabilities. For beyond visual range engagements, the J-11B and J-16 may carry longer-range air-to-air missiles like the PL-15, which outrange the MiG-29 UPG's R-77 missiles. However, the MiG-29 UPG's R-73 missiles are extremely maneuverable in close combat. The MiG-29 UPG has a smaller operational radius, 850 kilometers, than the J-11B J-16, which is 1,500 kilometers. However, this does not give Chinese jets an advantage while patrolling Tibet and Ladakh. We will discuss this aspect later. The J-11B and J-16 have larger armament loads and more varied multi-role capabilities, making them better suited for strikes than the MiG-29 UPG's defensive interceptor role. Sukhoi jets are known to be better capable of air combat maneuvers than the smaller MiG-29s. Having understood the basic parameters, let us dive into their capabilities over Ladakh and Tibet, which has rarefied air. Jets taking off from high-altitude bases already start in thinner air, necessitating higher speeds for lift. This enables pilots to routinely practice takeoff tactics in low-density conditions at high altitudes. MiGs taking off from lower Indian bases must climb through heavier air before reaching high altitudes over Ladakh or Tibet. It encounters the same problems as the Chinese aircraft when it reaches Ladakh or Tibet. MiG-29s have less maneuverability when ascending to altitude from lower bases. The accuracy of air-to-air missiles and explosives can decrease at high altitudes. This increased takeoff speed necessitates additional fuel consumption, lowering operational range time on station for missions. Increased fuel burn results in increased takeoff weight, which, combined with poorer lift in thin air, decreases armament and payload capacity from high-altitude bases. So, while experience in low-density takeoffs is advantageous, there are undoubtedly trade-offs in fuel, range, and weapon load. Chinese jets may have to sacrifice range or firepower to attain the necessary takeoff performance from facilities such as Ngari guns. Indian jets taking off from lower locations, such as Leh, can maximize fuel and armaments due to thicker air and slower takeoff speeds. Now, let us try to put some numbers on takeoff and weapons load capacity in such high altitudes. According to news reports, J-11Bs typically carry 4 air-to-air missiles, most likely PL-12 or PL-15 on Tibet patrols. This is down from its maximum capability of more than 6 missiles at lower altitudes. The arrangement might involve 25 to 30% fewer weapons. According to one source, the J-11B has a combat radius of roughly 500 to 600 kilometers from Ngari Gunsa base, compared to 1,500 kilometers from lower bases. Operating from Tibet results in a 60 to 70% reduction in range. Estimates indicate that the J-11B will have a peak external load of 8 to 9 tons from Ngari Gunsa, down from 12. This represents a payload capacity compromise of up to 25%. Ngari Gunsa will most likely burn 15 to 20% more fuel for the same takeoff weight. Now let us look at the J-16 estimated figures. At lower altitudes, the J-16 can carry approximately 12 air-to-air missiles. At Ngari Gunsa, this might be lowered by 25 to 30% to roughly 8 missiles. According to one source, The J-16's fighting radius from lower altitude bases is approximately 1,500 kilometers. At Ngarigunsa, this might be decreased by 60 to 70% to roughly 500 kilometers, similar to the J-11B. At low altitudes, the J-16 can carry up to 9 tons of external storage. This might be decreased by 20 to 25% to approximately 7 tons from Ngarigunsa. When operating from the high-altitude Tibetan base, the dual engines of the J-16 are estimated to burn 15 to 20% more fuel during takeoff than the J-11B. To summarize, estimated trade-offs for high-altitude Chinese sorties include 25 to 30% less air-to-air weapons, 60 to 70% reduced combat radius. There is up to 25% less external payload, and fuel burn is 15 to 20% greater during takeoff. Now let's understand the figures for MiG-29s operating from Leh. Indian MiG-29s operating from lower altitude bases will face penalties for ascending to higher altitudes over Ladakh and Tibet. As previously stated, the MiG-29s would have to climb through thicker air at lower altitudes before reaching rarefied air at higher altitudes. This dense air increases drag and lowers engine thrust availability. More fuel would have to be burnt during the climb phase to attain altitude over Ladakh or Tibet. This would lower the mission's total range and duration on the station. Higher fuel consumption means less weapons and payload capacity for flights from lower bases, such as Leh. Estimates imply a 10 to 15% reduction over taking off from a higher base. Maneuverability would be enhanced in dense air at low elevations. However, it would quickly degrade as the MiG-29s climbed to greater altitudes due to thin air. Now let's understand the beyond visual range scenario. The Chinese PL-15 missile's range is estimated to be over 400 kilometers, which is 60 to 70% longer than the Indian R-77's range. J-16 and J-11B are expected to transport PL-15 from the Tibet base, compared to 6 from lower altitudes. The MiG-29 can carry 4 R-77s from the lower base. J-16 is in service. The ceiling is roughly 20 kilometers compared to the MiG-29 UPG's 17 kilometers. The climb rate of the J-16 is believed to be 280 meters per second, compared to the MiG-29 UPG's 254. Overall, Chinese aircraft have an advantage here. Now, look at the dogfight scenario. The thrust-to-weight ratio of the J-16 is 1.1 compared to the MiG-29 UPGs. The sustained G-load of the J-16 is 8G compared to 9G for the MiG-29 UPG. At 10 kilometers altitude, the J-16 has a maximum speed of Mach 2.2 compared to the MiG-29 UPG's Mach 2.3. At an elevation of 18 kilometers, the advantage changes to J-16. In summary, the Chinese J-16 has a numeric edge in BVR and high-altitude regimes. However, the MiG-29 UPG may perform better in low-altitude dogfights. These are only approximate estimations for comparison. Now, do you think India will use MiG-29 for deep air defense in Tibet? Do let us know in the comments. We discuss such interesting subjects every day. Please subscribe to the channel and share and like the videos.